and now I'm working on the bracket for the gearbox, and unlike some of the other models, this appears to have just two fixings in the middle and the bolts either side. I've had to drill out one of the bolts on this side, and I've managed to undo one of the bolts on this side, which I've already replaced just temporary, and I've got it jacked up, and I need to take the other side off, and then it looks like it's going to come out. So we finally managed to get this out. I wasn't quite sure of how it was constructed, and we had to remove these 4 bolts, which are very difficult to get to. You actually have to push it over to one side to actually get them to go in. It's in quite a state, but they no longer manufacture these anymore, from what I understand, and that we might be able to buy a second-hand unit, but if we can't, then we'll have to repair the edges along here and along here. I think the rest of it looks okay. So after a bit of cleaning, we've managed to get the cross member to this state. We've taken off the edges on 2 sides, and we're not so sure that this cross member is going to be going back on again. It looks a little bit too thin to do the job properly, so we might have to find a second-hand unit for that. The other suspension, the other cross member mounts, this central one, all the metal works fine. The rubbers are clearly all perished, and obviously the rubbers on this have all perished, so we need new rubbers, a new or a good second-hand cross member, and new rubbers for this, and we can pop it back together again. So this is the new gearbox cross member, and although it's looking a bit oily and greasy, there's a limited amount of rust on it, and it's in far better condition than the one that we took off the car. So we're going to give this a good clean up. We've got new bushes to put on, we're going to give it a new paint job, and then it can go back on the car. So having spent a bit of time cleaning up the new gearbox cross member that we bought from eBay as totally solid, it's actually got rot in it around this area. You can actually see all the way through, so this one isn't suitable either. So now what we're doing is we're going back to our original one. I'm going to cut this end section off and put on a section from this one, which actually appears better. It's actually pretty good, that side. It's just this one area that's here that's quite bad. So we're going to change that, weld that back onto the old cross member, and hopefully we'll be able to give it a good clean up, weld it back on, and that'll be as best as the best we can do. So in the end, I decided to cut off both ends of this cross member that was actually on the car, and we cut off both ends of the one that we received from eBay, leaving the rusty part obviously on that part. And just before we put this into the sandblaster, we're making a note of the fixings as to where these rubbers were actually on the car. So on the curve side, and the nuts are on that side, on the curve side. So we've got the sort of scallop part cut there, which I believe goes towards the engine. I'm not quite sure, but it's probably quite easy to find out. But in relation to that curve side, the nuts are on the closest side to that. So I've managed to clean up these 2 pieces. I think it's about as clean as they're going to get. Still a bit of rust on them, but we're going to weld those back onto the main section once we've cleaned that as well. So these are the 3 pieces cleaned up as best as possible, and now we're going to put a few tack welds on them, check that they actually fit the car, and then when that's correct we're going to fully weld it. So after putting a few tack welds on and then trying it in the car, happy that it all fitted okay and the distances were right, we gave it a heavy weld on both sides. So this side's been done, and also the underside has been done, and we're going to clean up the underside, but not necessarily this side. This side is going to be left with the maximum weld on it. Right, so as you can see, we've now got a full gearbox crossmember put back together again, heavily welded on this side, and we've scuffed off welding on the other side, so that when this is painted, it should look pretty good. It shouldn't look so bad. I've left a little bit of extra weld on the top of this just to be on the safe side, but I'm sure it's absolutely fine. As we're going to be taking the cross member off again when it comes to taking the engine out and gearbox out, we put the modifications in, which is a hole either side of this hole, which we've actually slotted as well, which means we can get a socket in and undo the back of the bush, and when you undo the other two bolts, the whole thing can drop out. Alright, so these parts are all cleaned up now. These are the cross-member central part where all the bushes go in, and we'll just give that a coat of paint now and we're ready for reassemble. So we're just going to fit this bracket that goes on the gearbox cross-member, and we've got the rubbers to fit to it. However, the first problem we've come across is that the rubbers, the hole centres, are incorrect on the rubbers, so we've got to file them out so that they actually meet. So that one's wrong, and that one's wrong. These rubbers would never fit without being filed. These components were bought for MG Hive. Now that that's all bolted up in place, we can start to look at fitting the cross member. One other thing that we did is we, rather than file this section out, we actually curved it down, so if there is any vibrations on there, then that will reduce the wear. So we've just hooked the cross member over the rubbers that are already fitted to the gearbox, and now we're going to put in the bolts at either side, and then we can look at putting the nuts that fit onto the rubbers through the gearbox cross member using the new hole that we put underneath to get access to it. So then tightening up the bush at the very end through the hole that we've made to be able to do it.